Welcome to the Spirit Soul Series podcast, and we're back with another episode with Supriya Chechi, and we're going to start the chapter. We're going to start chapter 12, and I'll just do the incantation.
Okay, Hare Krishna, Jai Srila
Yeah.
Prabhupada.
ॐ ज्ञानतिमिरन्दस्य ज्ञानञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः श्रीचैतन्यो मनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपा कदा मायं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम् हे कृष्णा करुण सिंधु दीनबंधु जगतपते गोपेश गोपिकांता राधाकांता नमोस्तुते तप्त कंचन गौरंगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी ऋषभानुसुत देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वंशकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः नमो ओं विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमती भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी नामने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य शतारणे श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैता गदाधर श्रीवसादि गौर भक्तवृंदा हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे जय राधा माधवा कुंजा बिहारी जय राधा माधवा कुंजा बिहारी गोपी जन वल्लभा गिरिवारधारी गोपी जन वल्लभा गिरिवारधारी यशोदनंदन ब्रज जन रंजन यशोदनंदन ब्रज जन रंजन यमुना तीरावनचारी यमुना तीरावनचारी
Hare Krishna.
Krishna.
Okay, so we are on to the last 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita. And this the 12th, because the middle section is considered the Bhakti section. The 12th is the last of that section. And then when we start chapter 13, it will be all Gyan, how the material world functions and how we are situated and how we need to navigate.
Knowledge and object of knowledge that comes in the
Uh,
13th chapter.
yeah, and more than that, it's the three modes of material nature, faith in the three modes. So it helps us understand how to recognize ourselves, where we stand, how to recognize others, and how to interact accordingly. It's very practical chapters, chapter 14, chapter 17. So now here, chapter 12, what has happened is, as we know, the entire 11th chapter, Arjuna was shown the universal
Universal.
form. Yeah, the universal form. And Krishna is, so at the end of that, Arjuna gets, uh, he's of course initially astonished, then he's overwhelmed, and he requests to see Krishna in his original form, that is a two-handed form, as like a friend, which he was and is still to Arjuna. So Krishna first shows, instead of doing a direct and drastic transition from the universal form to the two-handed form, he first shows the four-handed form and then comes to the two-handed form. So the one major impact that the universal form has on the viewers is it is a representation of time, because what's shown there, it's like a sneak peek into the future, when all the Kauravas, even the important people on the Kaurava side, are shown uh, rushing like small moths or insects into the mouth of the universal form, basically making the point that whether Arjuna agrees to fight or not, their destiny has already been decided, and Arjuna will merely be an instrument if he agrees to obey Krishna's instructions, to do his duty as a Kshatriya and fight. So it's like a sneak peek into the future, and it's like a fast forward. And Krishna makes his point by saying, "Time I am, the destroyer of all things." So this point about time is a very deep one. that we can do what we like and we can make our plans, and we should make plans and we should try to execute those plans. The time just keeps moving on. And especially as far as material things are concerned, everything degenerates or deteriorates with time. I mean, it goes for our material belongings. It goes for, you can even see this happening in organizations that are set up. Frankly, even in spiritual organizations, the force of the material energy is so strong that things are just not as they were in that initial first flush of enthusiasm. And here I'm not talking so much about ISKCON, but I'm talking about a center where I've been going from 2013 in Rishikesh. It's like a breakaway branch of ISKCON. It's basically everything that ISKCON, its practice and its philosophy, but it's not under ISKCON shelter because its main person broke away from ISKCON. He was a Prabhupada disciple and he's no more now. So that place attracted us as a family after our first visit there. It's by the Ganges. It's all in a very small space. Everything is inside one building, so it is easy for elderly people like my parents. The temple is on the first floor. The restaurant where you get your food is in the prasadam is on the ground floor. The gift shop on the ground floor. The rooms are all around the temple and then on a higher floor. And from every room you can get the breeze and see the Ganges. It was fantastic, the whole place. It was called Madhuban. It is called Madhuban. So we went back several times, 6-7 times, once every year, and really loved it. And initially we would do this long, go to Delhi, then take a vehicle from there. And then someone there told us there's a short flight, Delhi, Dehradun. And then from Dehradun, it's just half an hour to this particular center in Rishikesh. So we did it. But then, like you see, it's just the time factor. 7 years ago, so we'd been going from 2013, now it's 10 years. 6-7 years ago, after 5 such visits, the person manning that whole center, he passed away. He wasn't that old, but he was diagnosed with some form of stomach cancer, which even he refused to believe because he was just so energetic and so dynamic. And he had the ability as a leader to hold his whole flock together. They were dead loyal to him, but he was very strict. So things just got done. Everybody who came there saw a very happy group there. He passed away, and then there was a lot of turbulence. We wondered what would happen next. Then the next person took over, who had been appointed in the time of the predecessor. He is very different nature. He's an introvert and he's knowledgeable and he's strict with his sadhana, but he's not like the earlier person. But still, it's like great that they're able to keep the place going. I still got a room, I got clean bed sheets, I got food, but you can see overall the place has begun to look run down. There's plenty of programs and children coming and quizzes and what you will call, in straight language preaching, Bhagavad Gita philosophy. But it's just all over. Now we can't get a view of the Ganges as we could because a third bridge has been built by the government. And excuse me. So that bridge blocks the view. Earlier there was just Ram Jhula and Lakshman Jhula. Now there is Janaki Setu. It is of course a great help for those who want to cross the river, but there it is. It's just completely huge structure. It's blocked the lovely view we could get of the Ganges flowing past. Then Rishikesh as a whole has deteriorated in the sense because I think the government is pushing tourism so hard that it's bringing people with a very commercial, it's just like really feeding the commercial forces. So room rents have gone up and you'll have foreign yoga seekers saying that earlier we could come and spend months, a whole year living with an Indian family in a small room, getting along nicely with them. Now they've also joined this new wave, and so they've jacked up the rent so much that we can't afford it. And they are not independently renting any longer. There are touts who kind of got control over the room rentals. So this is the commercial forces. Then bike rentals have been introduced in Rishikesh, which means that young people come from just across from other states, mostly Delhi, say, NCR, Haryana, etc. And then they get off a train. I don't think they come by plane. They get off a train or a taxi, and then they can rent a bike. So they zip around the mountain roads at terrific speed, causing accidents. Then they spend the whole night. Sometimes they come for just the weekend. Weekend revelers, really. So you will see by the Ganges here and there glass bottles, liquor bottles strewn there, because nobody is taking the trouble to make them even slightly sensitive to the spiritual, religious background and the power of the Ganges. Nothing, nobody. The government that's pushing this is not doing that, because I guess there's no time and the economic needs are pressing. So overall, you can see so much deterioration. The people living there will tell you, earlier just a couple of months every year used to be very crowded in Rishikesh. Now it's all the time.
Mm.
So it's what can be done? We can't set the clock back at all. So this is a very important factor, the time factor. Everything will and must deteriorate, and you can't stop time. So even if we have a setback, it's better not to brood too much about it, over it, and to think too much, or to become too attached to our negative feelings or positive feelings for that matter, because that will also pass. There's like a cliche, new age, this too shall pass. But
Mm.
actually, it is really true. People say,
Uh,
yeah, go on.
no, actually, when you said that, no, actually, yesterday, so something interesting happened.
Yeah,
I was speaking to somebody in my office. So, like, he has this, like, I guess, in his free time, he makes these Instagram reels where
right.
he, um, does some type of, I don't know if you've seen Instagram, they have these stories and all that they'll put on Instagram.
I see. I've
And
seen
some,
videos. I've seen
uh,
videos.
so,
Okay, no, I
so,
haven't seen
so
stories. Yeah,
So stories is a very short clip, like maybe like less than a minute or something, where people will do
right.
all kinds of things, like they'll act or they'll do something or the
Oh,
other, like that.
right.
Yeah, so he has this, he does it like quite regularly and all that, and he has a YouTube channel and all that also about it. So he was speaking to me about this, and then like he also said, "Do you have any like, do you do something?" I said, "I have this podcast where I where I discuss spiritual topics and things like that and all
Right.
that." But
Uh-huh.
I don't know. Maybe you might be interested. I don't know. I don't. I didn't want to push
Uh-huh.
anything too much into him and
Right,
all that.
right.
So I just said, I just have this podcast. Whatever I do. Okay, give me your link. Let me see the podcast and all that. So this happened like couple of weeks back or whatever. And then after that, yesterday he kind of like, I don't know. He reached out to me and asked me a very serious question. He said
Uh-huh.
that, do you feel lonely at times? And so
Uh-huh.
then I was like, yeah. Then I told him, and I think everybody feels lonely, but I think if you ha if you need to have some type of anchor that keeps you positions you like in one place, like that you can fall back to at some point. And
Right.
everybody's anchor and all is different and all that. And also the important thing is, like I was telling him that with time everything goes, it becomes everything, like if you're feeling worried now, one thing that you can always think about is that even this feeling also will go in sometime.
Pass.
Like
True.
it'll pass, and you'll get into a place where you'll feel good after some time also.
Right.
So to have that kind of mindset is also like, it's healthy, that if you think about it, if you're going through
Yeah, yeah,
a good if you're going through a good thing, then you should have that humility that okay, this is not gonna happen, this is not gonna last for too
yeah.
long.
Right.
If you're going through a bad thing, then also you should feel like this will also go away after some time, and
True.
something
It's
good
true.
will come. So I was just
It's true.
telling him this, and he was like, "Oh, okay, that's nice." And then he's like, what you said about the like having a sort of anchor, or having something that you can. So in my case, like it would be like, let's say Krishna, for example, being like
Right.
some devotional love to Krishna. But I didn't want to say that to him because he has no
Right.
context or
Right.
anything. So
Agreed.
I just said, just generally having an anchor. It can be anything. It can be something that you. So he's like, that really clicked for him for some reason. All that he told me.
Yes.
So then I was like, okay, okay, that's I don't know. I just said something that
But
I was
nice
like,
that, yeah, he
yeah,
felt free enough to ask that serious question, no?
yeah. So
Because
yeah,
it's really beneath all this rushing around that young highly paid people do, and the holidaying and the posts on social media. making out that they're really doing good. There's deep loneliness which nobody knows how to address. You may have a
Mm.
partner and you may have a family and you may have, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you actually can relate, or that doesn't necessarily mean that you feel understood. So then that's really the cause of the loneliness.
Mm. Actually, also the other thing is, so I think in our maybe in this new generation, or
Generation.
maybe
Yeah,
it's like people are like very, like they're very independent minded in one sense, where
that's
they
true.
want to, um, they realize, I think maybe a lot of the people in our generation, they kind of realize that, is there, like, what is the reason for getting married in the past was mostly because of, family,
Duty,
pressures of like,
responsibility. Yeah,
and yeah, and also the idea was that, what are you going to do when you go old? You get bored or whatever. But
right,
now there's so much distraction. There's like YouTube, and there's like all these digital platforms are there,
right.
and you can spend literally, you can spend an entire day just watching that whole thing, and you can pass your entire
Absolutely.
life just watching that. So the idea that, I mean, the argument that was there before doesn't necessarily hold that strong now, because people are going to feel like, I mean, I don't need to be alone. There's always technology. I can watch something and I'll be fine. And when I want to meet some friend, I can meet some friend.
Right.
And also the fact is that nowadays and all that, you know, like, maybe in the past it was like only men who had like, who used to work, but now even women work. And now they've also like realized that, they can also be independent on themselves. They don't have to be tied to anybody, and they don't need to be pressured to get married and, have a
Sure.
child and do all these things and all that. So they will like, there's like a mutual sort of thing of like, why should we get married sort of thing is going on right now.
Right, I know.
So very few people, I don't know, like I feel like even now, I guess maybe marriage is slowly maybe becoming overrated also. I don't know if that's
But at the
it's
same
slowly becoming
time,
a trend.
what you
Yeah.
said, that word anchor and anchoring is very important. Because for me, when you say anchor, I don't mean just that you necessarily get anchored or tied to a person, but I mean
Hmm.
that if we can develop the ability to voluntarily take more responsibility.
Hmm.
I'm saying in a slightly different context, but I see the difference. Uh, as part of my attempt to try to repair my health, and I take my cooking and food arrangements very seriously. So that's not to suggest that I just keep eating and eating or anything, but I'm very I stay sharply focused. What am I having for the next meal? If it's not something that they are making because it is too country nadan and I don't want it, I want something lighter, healthier, I make sure that I get into the kitchen and make it. So if I am going swimming, which I am going now almost every day, when I come back after doing those 10 laps of an Olympic sized pool, though it's at a very slow speed, I am hungry, and I
Hmm.
two idlis is okay, but I must have sambar with lot of vegetables in it. So I make sure I get up at 4:30 in the morning, and before I do any other sadhana, I make sure that the sambar is ready. Only then can I be ready at 6:30 to get into the vehicle and go swimming with my friend. So then
Hmm.
when I come back again, I stay focused. So many days, especially after the trip when I came back, I was reflecting on this, that my life here is now pretty hectic. It's because I have voluntarily, you can say, opted for it. Some days I do crib and complain and say all three meals I'm ending up making. What's the use of, I tell my mother, what's the use of you having a highly paid cook, a lady, and another assistant? Basically, what it comes down to is that because I don't like all this very traditional, I grew up in Delhi, I prefer a chapati and a curry, or which I make. I make the rajma, I make the dal makhani, I make whatever. And again, similarly, night I make shallow fry cutlets and soup, and so it's hectic. But I had this realization when I was traveling, because I had such little time to travel. I had basically 6 days, of which 2 days were in Rishikesh, 2 days were in Ranikhet, and one day each was on a train going this way and coming back that way, to bridge the distance between Ranikhet and Rishikesh. Like even after reaching Ranikhet, I reached by afternoon. It was 5 degrees. I was like shell shocked by the cold. I knew theoretically it's going to be like that. It was a particularly cold afternoon. And though they'd given room heater and they'd given blankets and they were so sweet, at night they came and gave a hot water bottle to keep next to us, next to me, to our body. I just slept straight from 4 in the evening or something till next morning. And then I was up, and then that was the day I had my friends visiting for lunch. So I had that day. And before the friends visiting for lunch, I made a trip to a Jhula Devi temple and another Hanuman temple there. There's no Krishna temple there. And then I had that afternoon and evening, and that's it. And the next day was my checking out. So it was really hectic and tight. There were train
Mm.
connections, and then after getting off a train, I had to watch that the train wasn't getting late, because then a taxi would be waiting for me to take me to the airport, and there was a flight from Dehradun to Delhi, and then from Delhi to Trivandrum. And on the outward journey, again I narrowly missed the cyclone, because
Ah.
having booked 3 months earlier, I went via Madras, Chennai, because the timings were more suitable. The time by which I would get into Dehradun if I went to Trivandrum, Chennai, and then after a
Mm.
halt, Chennai, Dehradun, was more favorable, because the problem with the Dehradun Rishikesh road is it runs through a nature reserve, the
Mm.
Motichur Wildlife Rajaji Nature Reserve. So you have elephant corridors, you have animals that come out the minute it starts getting dark. It's a real
Mm.
danger. They overturn vehicles. So I had to keep all this in mind. Now the Chennai, I mean, they were just predicting cyclone
Mm.
landfall. And when I reached there, it was drizzly and gloomy. And for the 2 hours I was stuck in the Chennai airport, I was really hoping the next flight would take off, but it did take off. But
Mm.
to cut a long story short, the hecticness taught me that I pulled it off. I was very anxious about my knee defect and climbing into trains, and the with my knee injury and that weak knee. I was anxious that I hadn't traveled or stepped on a plane or train for 4 years. I was older now,
Mm.
so I was really anxious about all these things. But I pulled it all off, because it just flashed, it just came in a flash that here I'm actually leading a very hectic life. Despite having the comfort of being privileged to live in a flat, and that my mom is still somewhat in charge, and there is domestic help. So why am I leading such a hectic life? Because I think I've taken a lot of responsibility. I solve every problem that comes up for my mother or in the house. I do my most of my cooking myself. I try to go for swimming in a great effort to try to bring down my weight. I do my reading. I do my hearing. I do counseling. Bhagavad Gita. So this anchoring, it's very important in life to take more responsibility. That responsibility in a way weighs you down and anchors you. Otherwise, in today's very superficial age, with it's not just that you get carried away by sense enjoyment and therefore drift from the spiritual path. You forget about that. Forget even about a person who's on the spiritual path. Anchoring, if it's not there, the material energy can really bewilder and mess you up, and you can take decisions that I think lead you adrift, make you do extremely sinful activity, can even cost you your life. We keep hearing all kinds of things to get you into the wrong
Yeah.
association.
uh, the actually, yeah, coming to that, but that's yeah, that's a very good point. And also, like, adding to it is like, so I mean, there's I think not just in his case, but also like I feel like in most people's cases, like as I'm getting more involved in my Krishna consciousness, like if I the more I practice, the more also I'm like beginning to see how, like, even the smallest of things, like, can hurt people in the worst way possible, like, like, or even when you talk about, like, taking responsibility and all that,
Yeah,
um sometimes also it's important to, like, I guess even accountability comes into that picture
very
as well,
good.
like being
Absolutely.
accountable for your
Yeah,
actions and all that, which I don't think maybe I was that accountable before, but now if let's say if I do if like even in my, like, even whether it's my work or even outside work, in most situations, if I feel like I've done something wrong to somebody, even in any way, then I try to take accountability for that, and just make
Right.
sure that I reach out to the person that, because you don't know, because I know like how uh, it's like, I guess maybe it's all comes down to communication. Like
Okay.
one if you don't, because people don't generally like understand what your intent is, but at least
Exactly.
if you can like convey that you didn't mean to do something, you meant to do it this way, then they'll realize that, I guess they'll realize that, that okay, he didn't, he may have actually thought, like he may have actually not want wasn't serious about this, actually he was probably thinking in this way, and he didn't mean to say something like this, he just meant that, and maybe I took it a bit, uh, maybe I
Right.
thought of it in a different way or something like that. So I feel like, I don't know, I feel like the this thing of making yourself very clear in what you're saying is very important, I feel,
I
because
think
the thing is, and even if somebody doesn't get what you're saying the first time, I think also it's important to then again say it again, so that people understand, like, okay, where what point you're coming from, because then what you say after that, like how you react after that will dictate, how that conversation will go
absolutely.
and how people
Absolutely.
will react.
After the anchor point, I think this again is a very important point you're making, to keep communicating as clearly as one can. Because if you want to pin that down to a shastric point, after all, let's face it, this is the age of Kali. This is the age of quarrel and hypocrisy. And as that famous verse, Kalavasmin Yuge Janaha, that one, the Manda Sumanda Mataya, that verse, not only people are short lived, and not only people are, the fact is that Upadrita is the last sentence as a word in the Upadrita means everyone is always disturbed. So it's what you're suggesting, that we must maintain clear communication, we must be clear ourselves, and which means that we have to constantly work and develop the ability to have clarity about issues that we are
Yeah.
going to
I
explain to
was
someone else, or yeah.
uh, I was just wanted to also say, like, I was watching this Prabhupada lecture today. Actually,
Right.
there's a channel where it only has like all lectures of Prabhupada. Only
Uh-huh.
Prabhupada lectures are there of him speaking.
Right.
So I was just seeing like one clip or something, and in that clip he was talking about, he's generally talking about like this, like, about God, or like, that you can just take Krishna's there to like accept you, and
Right.
like you can, and then but he also mentions that, it's important to chant the holy name of God in this age of, Kali, and this, that it's
Right.
important to chant, because in, by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's, like, mention that, the sage is meant for that, like he says. But you can, if you're uh, and so he says, and then one person asks, like, uh, what about, like, no, he says, like, uh, which other name is, like, holy or whatever, or he says something like that, and then one person in the audience, I think, says, uh, you know what about Jehovah?
Uh-huh.
Jehovah. So he
Right.
says, yeah, you can use his name also.
Okay.
Uh, Jehovah, like, yeah, he's like any name of God. You just,
Mhm.
as long, you say it and all stuff. And before that, he says that, like, which other God you can, here I can give you Krishna's name, his address, his father's name, mother's name, all these things and all stuff. And then that person says, but you can say anybody else's name, you can. But I was just like, when I was listening to that now, I was like, oh, this guy, he was such a good communicator. Like he knew exactly like what to say, like, and
This
how to say it.
point about
Yeah, and
that
how to
only
say
with
it.
Krishna can we
Yeah,
give the address and the father's name and the mother's name and the grandmother's name. It's
yeah. So he's
absolutely,
like,
I think, yeah.
yeah. So he says, like, in this is the only type of God that where you can know the names, you can know where he stayed, what he did, what are all his activities from his birth till like this. But
Right,
it's
right.
like, but he also makes the point that, that if you believe in a certain type of God, then you chant that name.
Right,
and
yeah.
you say that on them. And in
So that's
here,
very fair, isn't it? It's very
yeah,
fair. It's not this dogmatic, narrow view that, only our God is the best. Prabhupada never takes that line. At the same time, Prabhupada makes you think about this point. Like you said,
mm,
which other God will you get so many details so that you can get to know him better? Isn't it?
yeah.
Like it's true of all personal relationships. The more details you have, a little more you start speculating, or the interest is aroused. I wonder
Yeah.
what kind of house he or she lives in, and so on. So
Mm,
it's, yeah, Prabhupada I think was just great in this matter. But the point you said about clear communication, I've also felt it umpteen times, and it's been it's been kind of dinned into me even by my seniors in ISKCON, that it's very important, because otherwise this really is the age of quarrel and hypocrisy. Practically everybody misunderstands everyone else, and it's often pronounced inside families. What to talk of where it's been fallen into a particular rut, the interaction and the miscommunication. Because there are deeper issues lying behind, unresolved issues, hurt, grief, and so on. Then even with outsiders, it's very important to be very clear. But that means that we have to bring our own emotions under such
mm.
control, that we don't react, and we don't just say whatever. We rethink that, is this really wise to say this right now, and maybe that person, like you said, meant something else.
Keshav
And
Maharaj Swami has this. He does all. He actually does this actually quite well. I've seen
oh, I
in his
see.
the way he gives. Like there are people who will sometimes ask him like very difficult questions,
I
and then I'll
see.
watch his videos and I'll be like, okay, how is he gonna answer this? Because it's a
Uh-huh.
very some very complicated question they'll ask something and all that, and the way he handles the question and the way he responds to the question is very
Right.
like very like he'll take it and then sometimes he'll make a funny like he'll say something funny before he starts speaking.
I
So it's
see.
kind of like it's I think
It
maybe it's a tactic to just like make the whole situation light-hearted and
diffuse
then
the
def-
tension and the
diffuse
seriousness
tension
to
and
diffuse
then
it. Yeah,
yeah and then proceed to like answer the question. But he'll like he'll like somebody will ask him a very tough question and then he'll like listen to it and I can see his like expression also. He'll be
yeah.
listening very intently and
Uh,
then he'll wait for some time and then he'll say, what a great question.
uh,
And you
uh,
asked a really good question. And then he'll slowly start trying to say things, maybe try like paraphrase what that person said. And then I think maybe by that time he'll get the answer to, or maybe what he has to say, it'll come up to him, I guess. But the way
right.
he handles that is quite good actually.
Impressive. It's quite
Yeah,
good. Yeah.
it's very good. Very
Yeah. It's,
yeah. Some lot of people have this, but yeah, it's tough a lot to communicate the ideas very.
but basically, it's like what is being done here, especially I think Kesha Maharaj's case is, they are taking shelter or refuge of the mode of goodness
Mm,
to navigate the situation around, and the questions that are coming from a predominantly mode of passion and ignorance.
mm,
This is what is really, they're taking advantage of a higher platform, which is a mode of goodness, sattva guna, which we'll hear in chapter 14, chapter 17 coming up later in the Bhagavad Gita, because that mode of goodness supplies certain tools. If
mm,
you have deeply internalized the logic of the mode of goodness, and how it's extremely helpful to make our life more livable in our troubled times, then that satoguna you can use because all around you is the mode of passion and the mode of ignorance and the confusion and misery that comes from it. Like as you said, these questions are coming from people who are genuinely troubled or affected by this. So that's great to hear all that. Yeah, I think that's great. It's another thing that this mentor of mine, who now I'm not in touch with, lady, an Australian lady who lives in uh, I think she settled in Vrindavan now to spend her last years. She taught me some 20 years ago. Her name is Srimati Mataji. That is her spiritual name, Srimati. She should be in her 70s now. So she used to be extremely well organized. I mean, she would do things like she would take us on small expeditions by boat across the Ganges, country boats, okay, to some place which was important in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's lifetime, and something happened there. And she would have organized a proper meal, food, prasadam cooked and brought by another boat. And she'd have everything. She'd make sure everyone had paper cups and glasses. She would, to the point that if some people just strayed in, you have that situation in public, historically important places, anybody can come, right? Now, while we are sitting down to eat, you will have people, sometimes other devotees from the same organization coming and saying, oh, there's prasadam. And she shocked everyone because she told them, sorry, this is kind of number limited, so we can't serve you. Now, normally that is contrary to what we understand by Vaishnava etiquette. And later someone even took it up with her. But she said, you see, it's just a fact. There isn't enough for extras. We didn't plan it like that. It's not as if there's a kitchen going here so that we can go in and say, please produce at least some dal rice. And after that, she would make us do, I mean, it was pretty unusual. You know, this whole concept, how you take the dust of the dham is so auspicious that if you uptake it, and from a city viewpoint, we may wonder what you mean. It's just a whole lot of dust and damn nuisance, you have to wash it out. But the dust of the dham, or the dust where these great spiritual personalities actually have moved and walked centuries ago. So she made us do a rolling in the dust exercise. You know, it was great fun. Basically, we were like into peals of laughter, grown-up ladies. Those, you know, one of us would lie down, and then one of us would have to give a big heave or push and set off the rolling, and we'd roll and reach the other end of a slight slope. But where it was Bhakti Vinod Thakur's house, which was basically Bhakti Vinod is a father of Bhakti Siddhanta, who was the guru of Srila Prabhupada, and so many other important things that happened there, or where Lord Nityananda met Lord Chaitanya. So this rolling in the dust exercise really kind of caught everyone's. We'd never forget it, that she made us roll in the dust, and of course we came out all dusty. And on the boat ride back, as we were approaching the shore, another Australian, a lady who had 3 children, who didn't come, of course, for the trip. The children didn't come. She just suddenly announced she's diving into the Ganges, and she just kind of made one big splash, full sari and everything. She was a great swimmer, so she swam to the shore. But she gave us a shock. But she later told Srimati, you taught us that the way to get real blessings is to go and like take the dust. So similarly, the Ganges and its power to purify, we are not supposed to just look at it, or maybe take a very dignified bath, you know, dip your nose 3 times. So I just went for it, and Srimati couldn't say anything. So it's what I was trying to say. She used to make the point that the material energy is so powerful, it can overturn any situation. So one tactic is to be very well organized and disciplined and know why you're doing it, not in the army military style. You know, you're whipped and you're kind of punished severely. That can break people, I've heard in some cases. In some cases, Uttam Chetan will tell you he was a very rebellious type, and the army discipline helped him to make something of his life. He was talking honestly here the other day, because he was a very rebellious and very slightly wild kid when he was growing up. But army kind of really straightened him out. So, but that apart, this approach with Srimati, everything is planned in advance. All the details are attended to. She knows where to draw the lines. It's not just kind of loose and anybody can come and anybody can eat. And then some of the people who should eat don't get anything. It's not that kind of situation. So like clear communication, which is what you said, Keshav Maharaj does, and then you're saying you are also realize the importance, and you talked about that panel with Prabhupada and his lectures, is great tool in this age of confusion. And
Yeah. So
okay,
yeah, you can continue then, I guess.
So we are starting with chapter 12. In chapter 11 at the end, the very last verse of the that is 55. Basically, Krishna, after showing the universal form, is just making the point that someone who engages in my pure devotional service, free from the contamination of fruitive activities and mental, that is, go up, because it is the last verse of the 11th chapter. We're not
Oh,
getting too much into it.
okay. So you have to go to the last verse, right?
No, don't go. It's okay. Just stay where you are. Just making the point that universal form is all very well. It served a purpose, but like this time factor, that's how we started today's discussion. It served a purpose. It made it clear to Arjuna that basically, whether he agrees or doesn't agree to do his duty and fight, the destiny of those on the other side whom he fears will be killed. It's already been decided. When Krishna is in control, and he Arjuna will only be acting as a instrument. So, having made all those points, Krishna is in the last verse just reiterating this point that of the 11th chapter, personal devotional service, only personal worship, personal form of the Lord, do things directly to me, do things in a proper devotional mood. And then you will be friendly to every living being, be a pure devotional service, and make me the supreme goal of your life, and then you will come to me. So now Arjuna is going to ask some more questions, starting with a question comparing impersonal worship with personal worship. He's just kind of stirring up the topic for the benefit of the reader and for those who came centuries later. So the first verse, shall we chant
Yeah,
together 3 times like we usually do?
yeah. Arjuna Uvacha Evam Satata Yukta Ye Bhaktasvam Paryupasate Ye Chapi Aksharam Avyaktam Tesham Ke Yoga Vitamaha.
Again.
Arjuna Vacha Evam Satata Yukta Ye Bhaktasvam Paryupasate Ye Chapi Aksharam Avyaktam Tesham Ke Yoga Vitamaha. Arjuna Vacha Evam Satata Yukta Ye Bhaktasvam Aparyuvaste Ye Chapi Aksharam Avyaktam Tesham Ke Yoga Vitamaha.
All right. Uh, Please read. Arjuna inquired.
Arjuna inquired, which are considered to be most perfect, those who are always properly engaged in your devotional service, or those who worship the impersonal Brahman, the unmanifested?
Okay. So he's asking this question: impersonal worship as against the process of personal worship, which is better, which is more perfect. So the purport says Krishna has now explained about the personal, the impersonal, and the universal, the form, and has described all kinds of devotees and yogis, and generally the transcendentalists can be divided into two classes. One is the impersonalist and the other is the personalist. The personalist devotee engages himself with all energy in the service of the Supreme Lord. The impersonalist also engages himself not directly in the service of Krishna, but in meditation on the impersonal Brahman, the unmanifested. We find in this chapter that of the different processes for realization of the absolute truth, Bhakti Yoga, devotional service, is the highest. If one at all desires to have the association of the Supreme Personality Godhead, then he must take to devotional service. Those who worship the Supreme Lord directly by devotional service are called personalists. Those who engage themselves in meditation on the impersonal Brahman are called impersonalists. Arjuna is here questioning which position is better. There are different ways to realize the absolute truth. But Krishna indicates in this chapter that the Bhakti Yoga or devotional service to him is the highest of all, it is the most direct, and it is the easiest means for association with Godhead. Okay, please read from there in the
In the
second
second
chapter.
in the
Yeah.
second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the Supreme Lord explained that a living entity is not the material body. He is a spiritual spark, and the absolute truth is the spiritual whole. In the seventh chapter, he spoke of the living entity as being part and parcel of the supreme whole, and recommended that he transfer his attention fully to the whole. Then again, in the 8th chapter, it was said that anyone who thinks of Krishna at the time of quitting his body is at once transferred to the spiritual sky, to the abode of Krishna. And at the end of the 6th chapter, the Lord clearly said that of all yogis, one who always thinks of Krishna within himself is considered the most perfect. So, in practically every chapter, the conclusion has been that one should be attached to the personal form of Krishna, for that is the highest spiritual realization.
Right.
Nevertheless, there are those who are not attached to the personal form of Krishna. They are so firmly detached that even in the preparation of commentaries to Bhagavad Gita, they want to distract other people from Krishna and transfer all devotion to the impersonal Brahma Jyoti. They prefer to meditate on the impersonal form of the Absolute Truth, which is beyond the reach of the senses and is not manifest. And
Okay.
so, factually, there are two classes of transcendentalists. Now, Arjuna is trying to settle the question of which process is easier and which of the classes is most perfect. In other words, he is clarifying his own position because he is attached to the personal form of Krishna. He is not attached to the impersonal Brahman. He wants to know whether his position is secure. The impersonal manifestation, either in this material world or in the spiritual world of the Supreme Lord, is a problem for meditation. Actually, one cannot perfectly conceive of the impersonal feature of the absolute truth. Therefore, Arjuna wants to say, what is the use of such a waste of time?
Correct.
Arjuna experienced in the 11th chapter that to be attached to the personal form of Krishna is best because he could thus understand all other forms at the same time, and there was no disturbance to his love for Krishna. The important
Yes.
question asked of Krishna by Arjuna will clarify the distinction between the impersonal and personal conceptions of the absolute truth.
Correct. So this important question is to clarify the distinction between the impersonal and the personal conceptions of the absolute truth. Okay. Valuable because in the coming verses, I think it is in the fifth verse,
Mm,
there's a very important point that Krishna makes about why it is so difficult for those who take the impersonal worship path to actually get anywhere. Basically,
mm,
he makes a point that for lifetimes we have had a body, okay? The soul has been embodied, whether in some other species or whether even in the human form, so many lifetimes. So it is like something we are comfortable with. We naturally think like this. Something of value, it has a body. So if you're going to make the object of your worship, that is God, whatever name you may call him, and you're going to say he has no form, deep down it's like a very artificial understanding. We're so accustomed to always having a body ourselves.
mm,
We meaning the jiva or the soul has been embodied, has been in a body, no matter
mm,
which species and no matter how many lifetimes, man, woman, German, English, fat, thin, doesn't matter, sick, healthy, but it's there's always been a body. So that's it's like taken for granted, this bodification. And
mm,
then for such people to start thinking that, okay, I'm going to worship a god, but he has no form, he's formless, he's just light. It's a thoroughly artificial device. It will be short lived, it will be unsatisfactory, and in all probability, they have opted for it because they have suffered hurt and
mm.
injury, especially emotionally, in dealing with other creatures who have a body.
Form,
Namely,
like,
meaning, yeah, form, that's right. Namely, meaning other human beings, their relatives, their loved ones, or somebody they had interest in, or someone who let them down, or for that reason, they quickly find this artificial device that the Lord has no form. I will worship a God that has no form. So this is like a lovely point that comes up in chapter 5, in verse 5. But before that, we are going to move on to the second verse. Shri Bhagavanu
श्रीभगवानुवाच
Vacha
मयि आविश्य मनो ये मां नित्ययुक्ता उपासते
Upasate
श्रद्धया
Shraddhaya
पर्युपेतास्ते मे युक्ता तमा मताः
Shri
श्रीभगवानुवाच
Bhagavanu Vacha
मयि आवेश्य मनो ये मां नित्ययुक्ता
Nityayukta
उपासते
Upasate
श्रद्धया
Shraddhaya
पर्युपेतास्ते मे युक्ता तमा मताः श्रीभगवानुवाच मयि आवेश्य मनो ये मां नित्ययुक्ता उपासते श्रद्धाय परयुपेतास्ते मे युक्ता तमा मताः.
Okay, please read.
translation, the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "Those who fix their minds on my personal form and are always engaged in worshipping me with great and transcendental faith are considered by me to be most perfect."
Right. So he's saying this very explicitly. Those who fix their minds on my personal form are always engaged in worshipping me with and are always engaged in worshipping me with great and transcendental faith are considered by me to be most perfect. Okay. Same time, it's important to remember that the Lord also he is available in the
Impersonal.
impersonal form. He is both personal and impersonal. Okay, just make that the Brahmajyoti is still him.
Hmm.
He is like
So
meeting
I
a
have a this in
question.
this point actually, like I was just wondering if you read, let's say, the Gita commentary by like an impersonalist sage
Right.
or somebody like that, how
Yeah.
would they translate this particular verse? From it's like pretty clear that Krishna is talking about the personal form being greater. Even in, I guess, Sanskrit also it's mentioned like that. But if in like a impersonal son, like a sage, how would they interpret this
From
commentary and purpose?
what I remember of my early explorations of the Gita by Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan, it's generally considered an impersonal translation. They actually mislead this particular verse. And even subsequently, I tried to compare for the same reason, like you said,
Hmm.
even bought myself. I
Yeah,
rebought those books to compare.
yeah.
What they do is they say it is not to him, but it is not to him, Krishna, that he is asking us to surrender, but to the unborn within him. Makes no sense. They bring a new angle. Like they deny what he's saying by saying Krishna doesn't want you to surrender actually to him, but to the unborn within him.
But
This
what
is
is
like
that
a new
unborn?
one. Nobody knows. This is like no one
Unborn.
really knows what is the unborn. It's like I don't know if you told me or I came across it. Yes, I came across uh, a prominent leader. Apparently was asked by one of his followers because that leader, naming no names, very much promotes the worship of Lord Shiva. And this was being narrated in a critical way by a ISKCON devotee who subsequently got into trouble because he keeps pointing out these things. But what he is doing is actually absolutely the point the ISKCON devotee is making is really thought provoking. So I'm just going on to narrate. This other prominent leader who promotes Lord Shiva worship is asked by a eager and devoted follower, uh, so who is Lord Shiva? And I think he says Lord Shiva is nothingness. And just before that, kept saying, uh, you should focus on Lord Shiva, you should focus on Lord Shiva. So the point being, and the audience very eagerly lapped this up. Now, how are you supposed to worship something that is nothingness? It's just at a basic logical level. So the ISKCON devotee who is spoofing this song, pointing this out, is saying, what kind of audience just lets this pass?
Hmm.
You don't have to challenge the reputed leader, but it's just baffling. At least
Yeah,
if you're asking us,
it's not based on maybe proper scripture, and
that's right.
it's
I
not.
mean,
Where are you
even
saying that? Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
logically, if you know, it's just illogical. How are you supposed to meditate and focus on nothingness? But this is the height of impersonalism.
Yeah. Because
This
that
is like, yeah,
Buddhism they have the idea of void, the concept of void,
sure,
and so I
null
think
and void.
maybe
Yeah,
this come. I think maybe I think maybe it comes from that idea of like. But
sure.
even that also, I don't understand what like the void, like what that void is supposed to be exactly. Or they say it's the clear light of the void. That's what the Buddhists would say is what enlightenment is, or something like that. And a lot of the impersonalists have this idea of whether it's the clear light of the void or Brahman for Dvaita Vedantists, or I don't know, maybe other schools have the similar idea of like there's this, like I guess there's this like not almost like, yeah, maybe what he says nothingness, but it's like it's kind of like putting everything into one zero almost, or something like that, as if everything is like it comes together or something. I guess everything is like it's just like
Don't you mean
blank or something.
finally everything emerges into one? Or
Yeah,
what
yeah.
is
I
that the
think
idea?
I think their idea is that I think like um I don't know. I think I heard this from Sarva Priyanda where he says that gave this long time. I listened to this lecture of his where he talked about this thing of the Turiya, which is the thing of like you have like one level which is
Yeah.
your body, then you have the
Uh-huh.
second level which is the mind, and then you have a third level which is like your dream state, you can say,
Uh-huh.
and then there's a
Uh-huh.
fourth level which is the Turiya or the
Okay.
conscious. This Turiya is basically like it's kind of in one sense the state like where all the other states are sort of inside of it, but it's not. And it's all the three states are working within the Turiya, or the Turiyas in one sense you can say. I think he mentioned it as consciousness or something like that, where he says like in the body state you're fully aware, in the mind state you have some awareness of what your mind is thinking and things like that, and then in the dream state you also have certain things are playing in your mind still. There are certain things, your flashbacks are coming or something like
Sure.
that stuff.
Yeah.
Then there's another state, he says, but there's also one more state, which is this is between the Turiya and the, I mean, this is very technical. But basically, between the consciousness and the dream state, there's one state which is like you can say REM state, like where there's like blankness, like
Okay.
you're not having any dreams, it's just blank. So
Right.
the point is like in all these different states, you're different, like you're different people in one sense in different
Uh-huh.
states,
Uh-huh.
and there's a witness consciousness that is seeing all the other states together. And so whatever state you're in, it doesn't matter because you don't have any control to that. It's only the consciousness that is having some type of control on. So we are in one sense that is our true state, or whatever he's trying to say. Like
Right.
that's what
Right.
that is. I
Buddhism.
mean, that's the Advaitic Vedantic view. And I think their ideas like everything is like one, which you also said. No, I think merges into the Brahma
Right.
Jyoti, and these kinds of things and all stuff. And even in the Buddhists also, their ideas like clear light to the void, meaning like they are thinking that everything is null. Like you can you can negate everything in this world. Like everything is like pointless. So
Right.
pointless is in one sense meaning there's no value to it, and so because
Absolutely.
there's no value to it, it's zero. So the idea is everything is zero. Like they all their ideas are like based on this thing of like everything is comes to zero. That's why it's blank, it's void, it's uh it's everything is like that. Whereas in I guess in our this thing there is like we do have this personal form Krishna which
Right.
represents the highest value of
Right.
things. So that's why I guess there's always the difference.
Big
So
difference. Yeah.
yeah.
No, you're very you're correct, and you're smart to make the connection between this Lord Shiva worshipping prominent spiritual
Yeah, yeah.
leader. You're very
No,
correct to
I've just
make the
yeah.
connection with Buddhism. That
Ah.
is the answer. That's where all this kind of funny logic is coming from. And yeah, as you say, I can believe that it appeals to a lot of people because it kind of
It's
leads
yeah,
nowhere.
it's more easier. I would say it's very easy to like just understand that idea. Like
Right.
if some because I remember him Sarvapyanda was also speaking this in a lecture to a lot of
uh,
students and all that. And even
Turiya.
the way Turiya, and the way he explained it also, I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like it actually makes a lot of sense. But at the same time, there's this whole thing that's missing from that, which is like, well, if all that is true, then okay, then why do we all get like if everything is like that, then why do we all get bewildered? Like why do we all like the main question is like why do if everything is one, then why is it that we get disillusioned in one sense? Like
Right.
what is causing that disillusion? Like if so that means you're saying that even the illusion also is also part of like our uh, what do you say, like is also the one and the same. That can't be true because that's like um, that there has to be a difference. Otherwise, then we wouldn't have been disillusioned in the first
I
place. Like,
think you're meaning that we are disillusioned because clearly there is something more that we are searching for and
yeah,
we can't find it.
and
And
that those two things can't be the same. Like that
right,
enlightenment and delusion can't be the same. The
same,
disillusion is causing the beings to go away from enlightenment. Is the
exactly.
point. So
That's
then
so.
how can they be the same? Yeah, basically that's the thing.
Turiya is a totally Buddhist term, right?
I think it's
Buddhist
used in the
concept,
Advaita. No, it's used in the
Advaita.
Advaita Vedantic. I mean, Sarvapriyanandas used it. So
And
he was
Sarvaprem
talking about
meaning an Advaita Swami. Is that what
Swami.
you mean?
His name
Okay.
is Swami Sarvapriyan. He's the most
Really?
the most popular Advaita Vedantist in
YouTuber.
yeah
YouTube.
no yeah in the whole world, I would say. And he's I think largely responsible for most of the things that are happening in, let's say, the Ramakrishna mission and all these other
Okay.
different missions and other stuff.
Okay.
So
Okay. Okay.
he travels a lot to different places. Like he'll go to New York and he'll the stuff. And his talks are, before I used to find it very fascinating, but now when I listen to it, it's very difficult to like listen for a long time, because it's like there's so much, like, I mean, how you can't keep listening to, like, it just feels very little bit dry,
Right. Right.
and it feels a little dry, and it doesn't feel like very, I don't know, after listening to like the Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, and all these things, you just like
It's very
it's
dry.
so it's a little bit more like engaging and fun. Here it's more about you're speculating so much about the consciousness and
Right.
wondering from, you'll get into one trap after some time, and
Right.
then
Right. Yeah. Because our perspective or the personal worshipper's perspective is Jagan is not mithya. World is not unreal and null and void. It's there, it's real, but it's temporary. It will go
mm,
at the time of dissolution and when yugas change and so on. Now,
mm,
talking about null and void, if you remember the pranam mantra of Srila Prabhupada's, that was basically coined by his followers or disciples, praising and glorifying. Every time we speak the pranam mantra, we are glorifying the particular mission that personality came for. So Prabhupada, this Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale, fine, Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine. Now pay attention to the next two lines. Namaste Saraswati Devi, basically meaning they're coming in the Gaur Saraswat line, Gaudiya. Saraswati Devi, Gauravani Pracharine, that is spreading the message of Lord Gauranga, the Vani, the voice. Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine. He goes to save Tarine, to save and to reclaim those, the nirvishesha, those who believe that there is no variety, it's all this shunyavadi, the void is, who
mm,
believe that finally everything is emptiness and nothingness. Because like you said, it's very disillusioning. If you know everything, then why have we been given so many facilities with this body to question, to think, to do, to act, to achieve, if everything is finally nothingness? Nirvishesha Shunyavadi, Paschatya Desh of the Western countries. Paschim is West. Specifically, Lord, Srila Prabhupada's mission was to go out there and
mm,
to reclaim or to protect, to save these voidists, people basically ending up in drug camps, drug addicts, because they find no meaning. So they're taking LSD and so on to get a high. So temporarily they feel they've reached some spiritual platform, and then again they crash to the earth. And meanwhile, the more they overdose, the more harm they're doing to the physical body. These are the guys who flock to Prabhupada. You see, because he went specifically to save them. He went to the West to save them. The void is. So yeah, all of this is very useful. It's okay. Now to get back to our next, yeah, the same verse. Those who fix their
okay,
mind on my personal form. Now in the purport, what he's saying is, in answer to Arjuna's question, Krishna clearly says that he who concentrates upon his personal form and who worships him with faith and devotion is to be considered most perfect in yoga. For one in such Krishna consciousness, there are no material activities because everything is done for Krishna. A pure devotee is constantly engaged. Sometimes he chants, sometimes he hears or reads books about Krishna, sometimes he cooks prasadam or goes to the marketplace for purchase something for Krishna, or sometimes he washes the temple or the dishes. Whatever he does not let a single moment pass without devoting his activities to Krishna. Such action is in full samadhi. So this is again a pretty radical definition or redefinition of the word samadhi, because traditionally, even in the Madhva Sampradaya that we give our allegiance to, Samadhi means the death of the Guru, or a person who exits his physical body, and then they built this structure around, and then he remains powerful from within, though he is gone. That is what, or you say that someone has taken Samadhi, meaning he has passed away, a spiritual leader. There is Prabhupada Samadhi in Vrindavan because he left his physical body there. But this is a very kind of different definition. Samadhi really, it's a stage in yoga in the 6th chapter, if you see, where we study this Yama,
Ash,
Niyama,
yeah,
Dharana. It finally goes
Ashtanga
to
Yoga. It's
Ashtanga.
Ashtanga. Yeah, that's one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Final stage is Samadhi. So that is meaning that all the senses are controlled and the mind is single pointedly focused just on the object of worship. So here in Bhakti Yoga, which is a very active yoga, you don't just sit there lifeless and motionless and control your senses. You actually engage your senses in the service of the Lord, therefore purifying them and therefore preventing them from straying to material distractions, and keep them fully engaged and engaged. So he's talking about, like, you have that famous verse of what is that? Which personality was it in the was it not Yamunacharya? That was about sex and how he spits at the thought of sex. Is it with A? I don't mean Ajamila. I don't mean Kulashekara, who uses every sense or limb to serve the Lord. The feet for walking to the temple, the nose to smell the fragrance of the flowers of the garland, the eyes to see the Lord, the tongue to taste. It comes in some of these purports. A. Name the other important person with A. Not I.
Uh, is it
That is, yeah.
is it is it coming in that that in isn't that Indra pastime, that
No,
sage,
not no, not
that
like that. No, not the sage. Srila Prabhupada pushes it in here and there into the purports to give an
Hmm,
example of how to engage the senses fully.
okay.
Every sense is somehow connected with something to do with the deity. So, a particular personality or individual is named as someone who was able to do it. So, his eyes, he always longed to see. And it's not just him. There are so many examples. In Sri Rangam, there were great bhaktas, who every day would just want to see Ranganatha Swami
Hmm.
with A, not Ajamila, not Kulashekar Alvar, not, every sense would be, let me check in the index, the senses, and because this is a very good way to control the senses rather than artificially control as in Ashtanga Yoga. This is engaging the senses.
Hmm. It's like he mentions a person in
Yeah,
that.
he mentions a personality from scripture, a real personality, I mean, who existed years ago, who accomplished this. Okay, coming.
Ambarish.
Ambarish. Exactly. Good, good.
Okay.
That's right. That's Ambarish. Correct.
Maharaj Ambarish. Okay, okay.
Maharaj
He's,
Ambarish.
yeah.
You will see that being given as an example. So here is someone who, according to Prabhupada, because every sense is totally focused on the Lord and is engaged in the service of the Lord, Prabhupada is saying this is Samadhi. What more do you want for Samadhi? You don't have to literally sit down and and exit your body and get into death and then have something a structure constructed over you. Of course, that even we do. even the Swamis who passed away in Vrindavan, you would see the leading sannyasis. So that the latest being Keshav Maharaj's Guru Kadamba Kanana Swami is placed in Samadhi, meaning that after death has occurred, there are certain rituals and then the body is anointed and kept there, and there is spiritual power and you go and pray. So this is unusual definition, an alternate definition that is being given of a pure devotee. In answer to Arjuna's question, Krishna clearly says that he who concentrates upon his personal form and who worships him with faith and devotion is to be considered most perfect in yoga. For one in such Krishna consciousness, there are no material activities because everything is done for Krishna. A pure devotee is constantly engaged. Sometimes he chants, sometimes he hears or reads books about Krishna, sometimes he cooks prasadam or goes to the marketplace to purchase something for Krishna, or sometimes he washes the temple or the dishes. Whatever he does not let a single moment pass without devoting his activities to Krishna. Such action is in full samadhi. To not let a single moment pass without devoting your activities to Krishna is actually as good as being in samadhi.
Hmm.
Okay. Alright, so we'll stop here because there are just 5 minutes to 6 o'clock and we can't start a new verse. Okay.
This next verse, anyways, Krishna is talking about the impersonal, and
And this,
he's talking about those who worship the impersonal form, basically, and what
right.
happened
Uh-huh.
the next one. Yeah.
But the drawing makes sense and you engage at last. What he's saying is that there's still hope for them. It's
Hmm.
not like he condemns them. There's hope for everyone. That's another thing, about the Vedic system, that everybody was accommodated depending on where they are placed.
Hmm.
And you just climb from that rung of the ladder and start going up across lifetimes. Nobody
Hmm.
is condemned. It's not like another religion, like say in Islam, where only if you are Islamic you are acceptable. Otherwise, I don't know about certain branches of Christianity are also like that.
Okay.
Okay, so how is it going to be next weekend? Again, Saturday will work for you?
Uh, yeah. Saturday, I'm not sure. I might. So I'll just end this podcast. Yeah. Just end
Yeah.
it.